We're here with Daniel Gefen of the Can I Pick Your Brain podcast. Thank you, Daniel, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for having me.
Yes. So you have had the Can I Pick Your Brain podcast for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And you also are behind the Gefen Media Group and working on Podbooker.
Yes, Podbooker, that's correct. Podbooker.com, coming soon.
I can't wait to hear more about it. Give me the quick 10-second hook for it.
For Podbooker, okay, so basically it is the first platform that will allow podcast guests to find podcast hosts and podcast hosts to find podcast guests. And they'll be able to basically reach out to each other on the platform. There'll be a search algorithm so they could type in keywords to find the right shows and the right guests. And there'll also be you'll be able to have your profile on there so that a host doesn't need to go and start searching, Google for all your information. It's all in one place, and a whole lot of other very cool features that we're currently working on building out.
Oh, I love that. I think that will be very, very handy because I know when I'm looking for podcast guests, I'm looking to expand my network beyond what it already is.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So I know that you've been doing a lot of podcasts and you've had some really amazing guests on. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. And I'm totally going out of order on all my questions here. I have such great questions for you, but I want to hear everything. So what I want to know first is, with all the people you've interviewed, and you've interviewed Jeff Hoffman, who I also have met through Gen Network, and you've also interviewed Neil Patel and Vern Harnish. Who was your favorite guest out of everybody that you've interviewed?
That's a really tough one. I'm going to give you an answer that I just got by asking the same question to the chief rabbi of Israel, Rav Lau. He met the Queen of England. He sat with her for, I think it was like 3 hours or something like that. Had a whole conversation with the Queen of England. He sat with Fidel Castro from Cuba, and he sat with him for 4 hours. He met Barack Obama, President Donald Trump, you name it. Look, he's met with all different presidents, prime ministers, queens, right? And so I asked him the same question you just asked me, which was, of all the people that you've met, who you're most inspired by, like who was the best person that you spoke to? And he surprised me with his answer. He said, "That is a really stupid question." I was shocked. I was like, whoa, okay, oops. He's like, what is it with people who are fascinated with the best, the biggest? Nobody's the best. You take from everybody something else. That's the goal. When you meet someone, it's not about who's going to be the best person that you meet, or who's got the biggest, who's got the most amount of money, or who's the most inspiring, or who's got, the biggest following. It's what can I learn from this person? And I really like that. I like that answer because it's so true. It's all about, taking from every situation you have something, like growing from every situation. So to answer your question, from the chief rabbi of Israel, every single person who I've interviewed has given me something, learned something from them. When I had Russell Brunson on my show, that was huge for me because, this was somebody who was charging at the time $250,000 to speak on stage. Okay. To have, a one-on-one with him, he charges, I think it's $10,000 to have lunch. So I think it's like you sit with him for lunch, you take him out to lunch, and he charges $10,000 just to sit for lunch, right? And it has to be in his hometown. So to get him on my show and to speak to him for an hour and not pay anything was like incredible, just because I had a podcast show, which, by the way, shows you the power of podcasts. And by the way, today, if you look Russell now charges $500,000 to speak on stage, not $250,000. He's doubled his rate. But that to me was just absolutely mind blowing. There were so many people that I had on my show who I had read their books many years ago, and it's like meeting someone that when you watch them on TV, or when you read their books and suddenly you're able to have a conversation with them, it's like a dream come true. People like Jay Abraham, who was a legend in the marketing space, and I read all of his books. Tom Bilyeu, who runs Quest. He's a co-founder of Quest Nutrition. And he has his own show, and I was obsessed with his show. I'd watch it every single day. And then when I finally got to have him on my show, it was like, wow, I can't believe I'm speaking to Tom. But it's important not to idolize people. That's something that I've also learned. It's really easy to get into the whole oh my God, there's no way I could speak to this person. There's no way I'm going to ever be able to. And it's don't put them on a pedestal, because only statues are meant for pedestals. And B, don't make yourself so small, because you're bigger than you think you are.
That was an absolutely amazing answer to that question. And I do so agree with you that it's not about someone being the best or the most famous. It's about what everybody brings to the conversation. And I've had conversations with powerful people. I've had conversations with my next door neighbor, and it's the insights that each person brings to the conversation. It's those things that you don't know about. So now I want to know a little bit about you. So think back to when you were 13, and I know you have an interesting story from high school, but before you got to high school, tell me a little bit about yourself, what your aspirations were before high school, before you ended up going into that next spot where you're in detention all the time.
So you're talking about preteens, basically.
Yes.
The preteen world. I have very blurry memories about my my younger years. I just have bad memory in general. I was curious I guess like any kid, really just curious, always wanting to learn more, always trying to find a different way. Like if someone told me go left, I would go right, just because, right? And I was also very persistent and very stubborn as a child. I remember that. I remember being in a forest with my parents, and we were in the middle of nowhere, and I just suddenly had this urge to have some chocolate. And I don't know how old I was. I think I was around 5 or 6. But I just started telling my mother, I want chocolate. And she said, well, we don't have any chocolate, and she gave me other options. And I just said, no, I want chocolate. I want chocolate. And I just started singing this song over and over again for an hour straight. I want chocolate. 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 And my mom just went nuts. And she's like, all right, we'll get you chocolate. And so we had to we had to leave the forest. And I remember my mom and dad just frantically driving around trying to find some store that had chocolate somewhere, and we're Jewish as well, so we eat kosher, so we had to find a kosher store, which is even harder to find, so we got to find kosher chocolate. Don't ask. But in the end, I got my chocolate. I got my chocolate, and there it was. And so persistence pays. That was one of the first lessons I learned as a child, was persistence pays. If you keep at it, you keep going, and you stay focused on your goal, you'll get it. Even though you'll drive people crazy along the way sometimes. Mm-hmm. You can't please everybody.
Now, do you still like chocolate today?
No, I'm sick of it. Actually, it depends. Sometimes I'm in the mood. It depends. Sometimes, but in general, no, not so much.
So let's go into high school. Oh. Okay, we're still good here. For some reason, something beeped weird, but that often happens on podcasts. We get unexpected things, so we keep persevering through them. So let's go into your story with high school detention.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
Yeah, not my favorite place to go.
it's all
High
because
school
of the
detention.
chocolate, isn't it?
Yeah. No, the high school detention really was just more a matter of me really wanting to express myself freely. Um, and, by nature, I'm very creative and expressive. I enjoy speaking. I enjoy, uh, and also as a teenager, I craved attention. I craved it. And so I would get attention in any way I can, even if it meant getting, in trouble for it. And in fact, my schoolmates would encourage it. They loved it because there was, I would create drama in the classroom. Because to me, the classroom was boring, right? So I would sit there in the classroom and I would be bored. The teacher would be boring. And what she's teaching me is boring. And so I need to change this environment into a more dramatic environment. And so I would create the drama. So today you've got Netflix, but in those days you had Daniel Gefen in the class. And I would literally get on tables and do all sorts of stupid things. By the way, just a side note, any teacher that I have met later on in life, I have apologized to them and asked them for forgiveness, genuinely, because I felt bad. But obviously, as a teenager, you don't really care about anybody else. You're just thinking about yourself, and you're just thinking about getting a good laugh from the people in the classroom, right? And the problem was two things. Number one is I would always get into trouble, detention. But number two, which was worse, was the realization that my classmates weren't actually laughing with me; they were laughing at me. And and essentially I became their puppet. I became kind of like the puppet on the strings, and I realized that I was just basically put show for everybody else, but I was the one getting in trouble for it. And so it was attention, but it was toxic attention. It wasn't good attention. There's good attention and there's bad attention. Um, and obviously, as I grew older and and matured, I realized the difference between healthy and unhealthy attention, essentially.
Is there anything that you would suggest for schools or for education to make the classroom friendlier for someone like you who was creative and who needed attention?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that schools can do differently. I mean, the first thing I would say is people are different by nature. We're different. The fact that the school system hasn't evolved like everything else has is astounding to me. You look around 50 years ago, communication has changed, travel has evolved. Also, the way you cook, the way it's everything, right? Everything has changed, but the school system, the education system, is still uh, in the dinosaur age. Nothing's changed. Um, so the first thing is recognizing that everybody's different. There are different children. There are some children who have a high IQ. They are book smart. They can ace a test without even studying, right? I used to hate those people. They were just like, they just aced the test. They didn't even have to do anything. They were the smarty pants, the goody two shoes. And then you've got street smart. This is really important because for those of you listening, um, I think there's a lot of people who will be hearing this who will relate to this. When I was in school, I actually thought I was dumb. I genuinely thought I was dumb. A, because the students called me dumb. B, because my teachers called me dumb. And C, because I would get bad grades. And so that was proof that I was dumb. I was stupid. Um, as I've grown up and I've matured and I've had a lot of self-awareness, and I've also accomplished a lot in my life so far. I've had to prove to myself that I'm not dumb. I'm actually quite bright, and in some areas, specific areas, I excel exceedingly above the average person. And I would even say this, and I'm not saying this from an ego standpoint, because I believe this about everybody, not just myself, but I believe that there is certain areas of your life that you are a genius in that area. You are a genius in that area, but you have to discover what that is. I have found my zone of genius. I've discovered my zone of genius, and in that zone of genius, I would say I don't think there is any single person in my class that could outshine me in that zone of genius. They can't touch me there. But I was a dumb D grade student when it came to academics, when it came to actually having to memorize information and then repeat it back in a test. I failed. And that's cruel in a way, because for a system to, you know, essentially make a person feel that they're just useless. I felt useless. I felt I can't do this. It's a lie, and it's I felt imprisoned in a way. Looking back, it was a terrible, just a terrible period of my life.
Those are absolutely great insights, and I have my own stories there as well. Um, I've been parenting for 2.5 decades, and I have 4 kids. I'm not sure if you knew that or not, but even
No,
through the course of 2.5 decades of parenting, it's went from when I was in school and the focus on the grades to now we're finally starting to see a thing, or maybe it's just me and the people in my network, but I'm starting to see more and more where we're putting, or at least myself as I raise my children, I'm making sure that they know that it's not the grades that are important. It's, are they learning? Are they interested? Are they engaged? And also encouraging them and really to believe in themselves and their skills that are not necessarily academic, because some people are meant to be academic. Some people are meant to study. Some people are meant to be more of a cubicle person, or someone to work to conform and work that traditional life, where there's other people who are very creative, and they're the ones that are innovating and making change happen. And both of those things are great things, because we all have our own skills. But now we're reaching a point, I find, where we're finally understanding that a little bit. Our education system still needs to catch up, but we are starting to understand that our kids and ourselves, we each have our own individual skills.
yep,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So I would like to know a little bit more about what was your aha moment that got you from being in detention all the time to going to the next level? What made you decide to seek the path you decided to seek in life?
So I think like any aha moments that we have in life, usually we're not looking for them. They usually find us. Um, and I'm a very big believer in really just taking the right next steps. And then when you least expect it, that's when suddenly a door opens up totally from left field, but you didn't expect it, and suddenly that's when you usually we find our aha moments that come. And so for me, the aha moment in terms of, you know, discovering the zone of genius and figuring out the difference between, you know, healthy expression and unhealthy expression, really came about through me going into business and building up a successful business, and getting a phone call 4 years ago where someone said to me, Daniel, I heard you've got a really interesting story about how you built up your company and then you outsourced it to one of your competitors and you actually ran it out of a hotel lobby. And there was a whole thing there. There was a whole story there.
Sounds like one
And
I
so,
need to hear.
well, I actually wrote it in my book. I wrote a
Perfect.
book called it's called The Self-Help Addict. And that book is all about self-help addiction, and it goes through my whole journey.
Perfect.
And part of that story is essentially that whole, what happened with the business and how that all unfolded. But this person who was calling me said to me, "I'd love to have you on my podcast." Just like with us, Rebecca, you invited me onto your podcast. So this guy was the first person to ever invite me onto a podcast, and at the time, I had no idea what a podcast was. To me, it was like, what does that even mean? What's a podcast? So he explained to me what a podcast was, and I thought, wow, that's really cool. I've never done anything like that. I've never done radio or anything close to radio. Remember, my stage was the classroom. So there was maybe 20, 30 people in our classroom, and that was my stage. And so to be invited, excuse me, onto someone's, digital radio station, that was very cool. So there I was in my pajamas, in my house in Israel. I live in Israel. And what's incredible is, Israel is this tiny speck on the map. It's this tiny country. It's the size, I think it's smaller than New Jersey, state of New Jersey, right? The whole country is smaller than the state of New Jersey, just to give you context of how small it is. And there I am, with literally a headset and sitting in my room, and I just shared my story, just like I'm doing now. On this podcast, I was, just sharing my story. And what I found fascinating was I loved it. I enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed speaking. I enjoyed sharing my journey and sharing my story and sharing the insights that I've learned along the way. But what was amazing for me was at the end when the host said, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was great. Thank you so much. I then said to him, I said, well, how many people were listening? I was interested, Now, if you would have told me 50 people, I would have been impressed. If you would have told me 100 people, I would have been, wow, that's amazing, right? But he told me over 1,000 people were listening to the show. And I almost fell off my chair. I'm like, 1,000 people? I've never spoken to anywhere close to that amount of people. Where are they all? Because when you're going on a podcast, you're literally, in front of a microphone, or you're wearing a headset, and you could be staring at a wall like I am right now. I'm literally staring at a wall right now. I don't know who I'm talking to, right? And then he tells me where these people were listening. You can, because as a host, you can look at the countries, and he starts listing countries, right? America, Canada, Africa, China, Japan, Germany, Australia, England, France. I was like, what? That's nuts. Like, are you kidding me? You're telling me that I'm sitting here in Israel, this tiny country, in my pajamas, with a headset on, and I'm talking to over 1,000 people all over the world. That was my aha moment. That's when I realized that that through the power of podcasts, the platform, this has become my platform. Podcasting has become my platform. Through the power of podcasts, I'm able to share my story and share my message, and speak to people all over the world. That was incredible, and that was my aha moment, and that's what changed my whole sort of direction of where I was going. I started my own podcast show, grew it to over 250,000 downloads, interviewed some of the most incredible people that I've like I said before, that I've either read about or followed on social media, or just watched their YouTube videos, and just got to have incredible conversations with them. And it also got me on a whole journey of then going as a guest on podcast shows, because I realized that to be able to go on somebody else's show and leverage the audience that they've built and to be able to share with their audience and then grow my own audience, that's how I ended up starting my company, Gefen Media Group, which is where we help other people to get on top rated podcasts. Because I believe that podcasting right now is the most efficient and effective and most powerful way to grow your audience and become an authority in your space in today's world.
And I'm sure that our listeners are just absolutely loving this, because I'm entranced. I just want to keep listening to your story. It's one of the reasons I started my podcast, because I wanted to hear real stories from real entrepreneurs. And that's why it's called My EntreLife, because it's also your EntreLife. And I love that this is what you have fallen into. Myself, it started with Blab. Do you remember Blab?
Lab?
Blab.im. It was basically
Oh, like
video
AOL.
podcasts.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
Yes, yeah. So I used to run a video podcast, and it was amazing, just the different people that you would end up speaking with. And that is really what has led me here. And also the need for us to hear stories from people around the world and to hear females as well. We have tons of podcasters out there. It's nice to see a few more females coming on as well. So I like the fact that I can give a voice to females in the podcasting scene. So I want to know a little bit more about you. And my final question for you is, what are you most excited about or most passionate about right now?
Right now.
Right now. And it might be chocolate. I don't know.
Right. In this second, it's like I'm excited about reaching a whole new audience and being able to share, myself with other people. It's really, as I said before, it's like fascinating to be able to really. I'm just astounded that you could literally be anywhere in the world and you can reach out to somebody right now who's listening in China or in Belgium or in France or wherever it is in the world. To me, that's what gets me really fired up and really excited. And I really believe that anybody who is not taking advantage of this incredible platform and just getting out there and just coming out of your shell and sharing your stories and sharing your messages, you don't know who you can affect. You have no idea who you can impact. It absolutely astounds me at the amount of impact a person can have by sharing their story, and you don't know who's going to be affected by it. I'll give you an example. So I had a guy called Toph Evans on my show. This was about a year ago, and he came on and he was talking about how at one point in his life he was severely, severely depressed, to a point where he was suicidal, and he had locked himself up in his bedroom and didn't leave for a whole week. He was in bed. He literally didn't leave, didn't see the light of day. And obviously his friends were very concerned. And one of his friends came over and came into his room and said, Toph, you've got to get out of bed. This is really, really not good. It's just so unhealthy. You've got to just at least come out for like a little run. Like, let's just go for a run for like 10 minutes. And Toph said, there's absolutely no way I'm going for a run. Like, I could barely move. I don't care. I don't want to know. And his friend was very, very persistent, right? And he said, look, I'm not moving from here unless you come for a run with me just for 10 minutes. And so after about an hour of his friend just literally standing there waiting, Toph said, all right, fine. Like, I'll make a deal with you. I'll come for a run for 10 minutes as long as you promise to leave me alone. Like, afterwards, don't come back. Leave me alone. That's it. And he said, deal. So they went out. They went for a run. And when they came back, Toph felt completely different. Something changed. He's like, I don't know what happened. I feel alive. I don't know. Let's do another run tomorrow for 10 minutes. So they went running every day for 10 minutes. And 10 minutes turned into 30 minutes. And 30 minutes turned into an hour. And an hour turned into half a marathon. And half a marathon turned into a marathon. And a marathon turned into an ultra marathon up Mount Everest, only one of 100 people in the world to ever achieve that. And then he became an extreme athlete, raising money for charity. He's done a 24-hour treadmill run. He's done a 12-hour swim. He's now a published author. He wrote a book, and he's a podcast host as well. And he's speaking on stages. Totally blew me away. Totally blew me away. And of course, there's a whole audience out there that is listening to this episode. And I get an email from someone, from one of those people that were listening. And the email said the following. He said, Daniel, I want to thank you because I have been suicidal and I've been contemplating to take my life. And I stumbled upon your episode with Toph Evans, and his story inspired me so much that I started running, and it has helped me. And now I want to be like him, and I want to write a book, and I want to start my own podcast show. And Rebecca, today he has his own podcast show, and he's written his own book. And you never know who you're going to affect.
It gives you shivers, absolute shivers. I've given talks on mental health myself about my own history, and I've had people come up after these talks and just say, Rebecca, thank you for sharing your story. And it gives you those shivers, those chills in your spine, because you know at that moment you have directly impacted someone. You don't know how it has affected them, but you have made an impact by sharing your story and by sharing your vulnerability. So thank you very much for sharing that story with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the problem is so many people think that their story doesn't matter, but it does. Because to somebody, your story is incredibly inspiring, even though you may not think so. But the more you tell it, the more surprised you'll be at how many people come and say, wow, I'm so touched. And you're like, really? Well, I didn't think it was that big of a deal.
So I'll tell you a quick story before we end. One of my biggest aha moments was actually from something I misheard or a mistake. And that's how much a story can impact people, because it's what you're hearing. It may not even be exactly what's related to you. But for me, I was sitting in an audience at a huge event, watching this woman on stage talking about her baby. And it made me think, why am I not doing this? Why am I not up on stage? Why am I not planning an event? Why am I not reaching higher? Because if she has a baby and can do it, why can't I? Now, here's the interesting thing. The baby she was talking about was a dog.
Yeah, that's funny.
But because I heard what I needed to hear at that moment, I heard she has a baby and she's doing that stuff. That gave me the strength and the power to say, okay, I need to take this to the next level. I am fully capable of doing it. And it allowed me to believe in myself, which is something I feel we really need. And it's something that sharing our stories through podcasts and other methods, it really can improve. So thank you, Daniel, for joining us today on My EntreLife. Do you have any parting words?
The parting words. I would say, if you feel that you have a message that you want to express, and what I mean by that is if you have this burning desire to really go out and inspire and impact people, and not everybody does, by the way. There's plenty of people who will be more than happy to spend the rest of their life sitting behind a desk, you know, doing their thing, or driving a truck, or waiting on tables, or running a restaurant, like, and they're all amazing. Everybody's amazing. Everybody's doing what they're doing. But then there are those individuals who have a burning desire to get out there and to inspire others and to impact people through their stories and through their messages. And if you're one of those people, then I highly, highly urge you to just start getting out there by getting on some podcasts. Don't go for some big podcasts that, you know, just go on the smaller podcasts. Start make a goal for yourself. Say, if you haven't been on a podcast yet, your goal should be, I'm going to get myself booked on a podcast. That's the first goal. I'm going to get booked on a podcast. And all the questions that you have in your head about, what am I going to talk about? Am I even, like, who am I to speak on a podcast? They're all just, they're all the voices of your haters or your non-believers. And they're just reflections of maybe people who have told you you're not good enough. And I would just ignore those voices and just go for it. Just go on that show and just start sharing your story, start sharing your messages. If one person gets impacted by it, then it's worth it, even if that one person is you.
Perfect. So thank you again for joining us, Daniel. And audience, you can find Daniel at the Can I Pick Your Brain podcast, and watch out for the Podbooker platform coming soon, because I'm really excited about that. So thank you for joining us, and tune in next time to My EntreLife.